About a month ago, my husband was going to make a quick stop at Menards after work. But little did he know that he'd be bringing home a precious little kitten we named Socks. Hi creatives, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Lauren Elizabeth with Lauren Elizabeth Animal Art. I'm a certified art therapy practitioner and independent animal artist. That day my husband found this little kitten, dirty, cold, abandoned. We brought him home. We thought we were gonna keep this cat, but with 5 animals, 2 young children, and 2 of those pets having many health issues, we just couldn't rescue another kitty. So to help me let go and detach, I decided to paint Socks, gift this portrait to the owner, foster Socks for a few days, and so that's why we're gonna be painting Socks today. The sweetest little kitty cat, beautiful coloring, very affectionate, very playful, really does get along with children and other pets. So with all that inspiration and the backstory, guys, let's get started painting. All right, creatives, so if you'd like to paint along to this art therapy-based tutorial and access my new kitten painting guide, it's all linked in the description along with the traceable outline and the reference, which will not be on the screen, and a list of materials. I'm going to add white and raw umber to my paint palette. Phalocyan in blue and grass green. And there's one more coming, it's the color black. So with my paint palette, or my palette knife, I'm going to mix up white, and this is for the dark area. I will need some black too. So I'm going to mix equal parts raw umber, black, and lots of white. That's raw umber, black, and titanium white. And if you keep watching, you'll get to know why we chose the name Socks and a very surprising discovery we made about Socks once I gifted this portrait to the owner. I might have to make that a bit darker, we'll find out. I'm going to go with a light gray. Now this is a very light gray, so lots of white and just a tiny bit of black. Now the beginning plan was that I was going to add a carpet beneath Socks, but that does change and I make it a flat background layer. We'll be using all the colors we mix up right now except for the green. Okay, again, that's except the green. And then white, I'll pick up some white with making a medium value navy blue. I'm seeing a grayish blue and even some greens in the carpet. So that's why I'm doing white and then some black. So I went with Phalocyan in blue, white and black. So continue mixing your colors if you're still doing the mixing. I'm not going to add any green, which is why I'm going to cut this part a little shorter and grab your size 5 Arteza angle brush. Size 5 angle brush. And I'll just start at the top and I'm going to see if this is dark enough. I think this is dark enough. We'll kind of let that dry and that'll tell us. So if you missed it, I'm using my size 5 Arteza angle brush. I'm going to be using the blending technique, working from top down. So we want to work at a steady pace, allowing us to do this mixing right on our canvas. All right, so we're going to do some breathing techniques in between my instruction to help us get grounded. A big inhale through the nose, a longer exhale through the mouth. Let's do that 5 times, in through the nose, out through the mouth, as we're painting. while that's wet, I'm going to pick up some of this blue. I'm blending these colors straight on my canvas, joining them nicely using these back and forth and somewhat circular motions. And then I recommend washing off your brush and or wiping it off on your cloth or paper towel, and then moving down with just that blue. Now I also want to mention that this is what I like to call an open-ended tutorial. So feel free to follow the exact same steps I'm using, but I want to encourage you to be expressive, creative, trying different colors, adding different objects to the background, going a little different, off script. So here we are working with just the navy blue, and I'm using the point of my brush to cut in to that texture along Socks' back and neck. And now switching to the lighter gray, and we'll blend that down. Going pretty far into Socks' fur coat so that we can layer over top with our liner brush. I'm going to clean off my brush and see if I can mix these colors together so it's a nice fade. I really want this to look like it's darker underneath that little dresser, shelves area, dresser, yeah. Excellent. Washing off my brush, and now going to my gray, my lighter gray. I like what just happened. I actually got a little bit more black in there, and that's what's going to happen. We're going to actually be getting that area darker for the shadows around Socks. So if you notice, it is actually a bit darker right here. I'm going to pull on a little bit of black into this gray. Getting this area a bit darker. Right behind Socks, because this light source is coming from the upper left. In the front here, I'll add more white to get this a little lighter. Back to that lighter medium to light gray. And even lighter as I move over, but then it gets darker inside here. Now, normally kittens don't have very long fur, not always, but they haven't had much time to grow that fur coat. So we have a bit more wiggle room to add lots of work, lots of detail to the background throughout the process instead of just at the beginning. However, if you have a kitten with much thicker, fuller, longer fur, I recommend getting the background done right off the bat at the beginning and then painting that fur. I'm jumping ahead a little bit because I want, seeing how much lighter it is on that left side, I think I want to lighten up this area here. So I'm going to do a mix between this blue with a little bit more added white, navy blue, medium gray, and a little bit more added white. And now for that darker medium blue. And I may have to bring in some more of that dark gray with the raw umber in it, mix it with some of the navy blue. I'm going to switch to my size 1 round brush so that I can get this darker inside here with actually our dark gray. A little too dark, so I'm going to pull in some of that white, a little bit more of the medium gray in there. And back to the medium gray so I can blend it. So I just am getting that equal to the medium gray at the front. That's why I added in some white. And then I'll get this side darker with more of a dark gray, but being careful not to add too much of the dark gray. It can really help to use a larger clean brush to just smooth things out that's damp. It can really help blend it, but just be careful you're not pulling off too much paint when you do that, because sometimes it happens. All right, so next I'm going to work top down now, just like we did here, but I'm not going to go up. I'm going to work dark to light. All right, so as you're working on the top of your canvas on your background, be sure not to leave any white specks around the sketch of socks. So now I'm going to share why we chose that name. It was actually a decision me and my children made because Little Socks was obsessed with socks. Everywhere we would walk, this cat would suck on our toes, try to pull our socks off. And when those socks were finally off, or anytime they were lying around, those were his. He would play with them, straddle them as if it was like a bird or a mouse. He just loves socks. And the surprising thing for all of us, because we just kept calling it a he, I assumed it was male. Throughout this entire tutorial, I'm saying him, his. Guess what? Socks is a female. I could have put money on it. I thought it was a boy for sure, but I was entirely wrong. It was the rescue that we eventually gave Socks to, and they gave us a call and told us that Socks was indeed a female. Anyway, I guess that doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, the happiest part of the story is that Socks was adopted. I'm thrilled the owner got the portrait, Socks is in a loving home, and it all came together. Plus, now you guys can paint Socks too. And now for navy blue. Blending that around the same line. Sometimes you have to wipe some paint off to get that as we move down so it gets lighter. But I will be switching sooner to my gray since I brought it more gray up there and because of that light source. So I'll go jump to the medium gray. Wash my brush off and probably mix up a little bit more medium gray. I think that's the best idea. I'll move right here. Look closely at how I'm leaving that fur texture, cutting in real close into that traceable outline as I'm lightening up to the left of socks. You really don't want to have to go back to this background unless you have to. And so I want to make sure I get in and around those lines. Getting this a little bit lighter, adding more lightness on this left side. So I'll add a little bit more white before this gray dries. Getting that a bit lighter. I'm even just liking this flat layer. It looks kind of ominous, doesn't it? I want to make this even. This is a little bit lighter, which does make sense, but either we lighten this up or darken that up. I kind of like this side, so I'm going to mix in more of this blue with a little bit of the medium gray. I'm going to try and get it to that value right there. Maybe even pull in some of this gray. And then some medium gray. Then back to my light gray to blend that up. Okay, I'll wipe some of that paint off. Go back to the light medium gray. There we go, I think that did it. Now you don't need to get too caught up in detail. I am gifting this, so I'm spending a little bit more time on this flat blended layer. But if you need to, move ahead and bypass this. I see some thin painted areas, and I'm going to see if I can get that value a bit darker with a little bit more black, so I can paint over some of these areas. That's a little too dark. Pull some of that medium gray in there and get this a bit thicker in paint on this side. So I need to make it a little darker. Poor little guy, looks kind of sad, right? Looks kind of like how we found him, in a way, abandoned in a dark place. Maybe this background, this painting really resonates with you, and you also feel abandoned. You may feel rejected, or just completely alone this holiday. I'm pretty sure Socks felt that way too. Poor thing was so cold, dirty, all alone, but just like we scooped up Socks, we cleaned him up, we gave him warmth and food and water and snuggles, God has that same deep compassion for you. He comes and promises His presence, His love, His grace and mercy in whatever loneliness that you're experiencing right now. And Jesus also experienced loneliness and rejection, but that still never stopped Him from His mission of love. So can I remind you that God will never leave you. He will never forsake you. And also encourage you to give what you need. Give a listening ear, or maybe call someone you haven't spoken to in years, or share a meal with someone. Your feelings might be very valid. They're real. It's not something to ignore, but we can actually use them to propel us forward from it and to serve somebody else in it. Watch and see how that raises your joy, your gratitude, and even might make a friend in the process. So I am going to do something different than how I initially thought. I'm not going to add the carpet texture. I'm going to add socks over top this flat layer, which I actually kind of think it suits this particular portrait. And so we need fresh water for that and a new paper towel. So I think the easiest thing to do when it comes to just painting in socks, I'm going to use my size 1 round brush and just paint them in on this somewhat sticky. It's tacky right now, so you kind of want to wait till it's dry or tacky. And I'll just go in with white, just to make the shape of it, and then we'll paint in the colors over top. And this is entirely up to you where you want to place them, how big you want to make them, but they are laying on the carpet or this ground area. So I'm going to kind of create that perspective with the top of the sock kind of coming off our canvas. Now, if you're painting socks in your background, it may be helpful to grab your socks, maybe the ones you're wearing or a different pair, lay them on the ground, see kind of that perspective, and get an idea of how you want to place these socks. And that's what I did. And it might even give you some more inspiration on color and design. But again, do not let me limit you. Let this be your own. Allow the creative process to guide you. Maybe you do want to add a carpet below socks. Or maybe in the background, instead of socks, you want to add a basket with flowers. Or a blanket, maybe beneath socks or behind socks. Find ways to add variety to this portrait in color and design and imagery. Use patterns, repeat symbols, add text. Again, it's entirely up to you how simple or complex you want this composition to be. Excellent. So that'll be one sock. I'll let that dry. I'll do another sock right here that's a bit larger. Can't see much of it. just partially coming off, so we only see a little bit of that canvas. And then I'll curl this end. I got some green in there, a little bit of green. Let the accidents happen. They can turn into something really beautiful. So before you jump to just fixing it, let it be for a little while. Sit with it, see what you think, and then decide. I'm adding a bit of white on my paint palette so I can go on sock number 3. I think what I'll do is have this more pointed up towards socks. And to create that depth, it's important that we make this sock larger than this one. It doesn't have to be a lot larger, but just slightly larger. I'll just add another coat of paint over this. It's almost like the gesso that we're adding. A really rich layer underneath so that we can add the colors over top. Now I'm just seeing too much negative space over here. I know I like the blue strip over here, but I think there just needs to be another sock over here. coming up behind socks. I just might see the corner of it. So grab that courage and just test things out. This is the color white, so it's not super dark. You can just paint right over it, let it dry, try something new. Just try something new. Do I want it like that though? I'm almost wondering if I need to go up at that angle. What if I do this? I want to make sure it looks like it's laying on the carpet or laying on the ground. Now here's another little friendly reminder to breathe. Do your deep breathing. Try not to hold your breath. Come back to the present. So while we let our background dry fully, I'm going to start working on the eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. Those are the steps I do after the background and any connected parts. We don't have any connected parts, like things that the cat's wearing, clothing, any accessories, collar, leash. So I'm going to go, I do have my black. I'm going to kind of pull that aside so it's a little cleaner. And for the colors, I will use yellow ochre. So sorry, raw sienna and yellow ochre. I'll add some cadmium yellow to pull out those yellows in socks. I'm gonna pull out some of the hints of violet that I see inside the ears. I see only a hint of it, but I'm gonna draw that out. And permanent red for that sweet little nose and muzzle area. And once more, I'm going to refresh my water. So I also hope you have some green and some phalocyanin blue left on your paint palette. We're going to be using that for the eyes. So I'm going to draw out those beautiful turquoise in the eyes. So I'm going to use white, grass green, just a little bit, and a little bit of phthalo blue. They're a little bit more green than blue. So I'll add more white and grass green. I'll mix up a dark gray. We're going to use this dark gray quite a bit, so I'll just need a little bit of white and lots of black. I'm gonna drop some white because I already have a lot of colors mixed into this one. And so for that, I'm gonna pull in yellow ochre. That's a little too much white, so I'm gonna pull it aside. Yellow ochre and white. And then I'll also get inside those ears. We're kind of doing a little bit around, but a little bit inside those ears. And so for that, I'm going to do a bit of violet. This is going to be very light. Lots of white, maybe not as much as before, and permanent red for inside those ears. See how strong those colors are? Okay, so that's more than we need, but that's okay. And now just for that nose, I'll actually get that nose a little bit more on the brown side. So that's permanent red, raw sienna, and some white. Permanent red, raw sienna, and white. All right, let's work with these colors. So we have the eye color. This is a turquoise, a very beautiful, vibrant yellow, ochre, and white for parts of the ear. We may not get to this, we'll see. And then the magenta for the inner ear. Dark gray, we'll start with that. And then our nose color, which is a brownish red. These are the colors I would use. And now I'm going to start with my size 0 spot brush. And I'm going to outline the eyes and fill in the pupils, and also do a bit of shading around the top of the eye. Now, it's no surprise, but kittens will have much smaller eyes than we're used to painting on adult cats. The dimension and the depth in those eyes aren't going to be as prominent. We won't have as much range of colors that we'll be adding. It's kind of in our favor because of how small these are, but they definitely have a good amount of eyelid, shadow right above both pupils, just like regular adult cats. And we always want to pay close attention to where that light source is hitting those eyes, and we want to put a lot of detail in these eyes. Again, that's a focal point, and that's where the viewer is going to look first. I'm going to go straight into my turquoise and do some blending into some of those grays. So what I mean by that is, as my gray is still wet in this upper left corner, I'm going to pull some of that turquoise over top the white and blend it into some of those grays because of that light hitting the left side the strongest and less light hitting the right eye. Now, try your best to keep your hands steady. I definitely said my prayers here because of how tiny, itty bitty this space is. So just take your time and use the pause or play button if you need to, if I'm going too fast. Excellent. I actually left a bit of white because I'm going to be blending in some of this dark gray into that turquoise a little bit more. There's a shadow being created from that upper eyelid area. This will also help the cat look a little bit less frightened. Socks was a pretty brave kitty. Like, he got scared, but I was incredibly surprised by the giants in our house and how he handled it. Gave me courage to face my giants. Big dogs and other cats that were much older. And he goes right up to them. Now, call me dramatic. I get very attached to animals, but this is truly helping me express a bit of grief, letting go of socks. Yes, it might seem so minor, something that's almost a little silly, but if you take the time to use your art to express those feelings and emotions, it will reveal things that you didn't know were there. It's actively doing something with the pain or the trauma or the loneliness or that rejection. So it can help break that avoidance cycle and facing pain, facing that struggle in a very safe environment, a comfortable space like this, one that's not at all hurting you or hurting others, but quite the opposite. It's a healthy, productive release of those things that's going on inside. It fosters that self-awareness and builds that resilience. All right, so I guess we will need to use this yellow. I'll mix in some dark gray into that to get this shadow in here. Get that a little darker. And even around, I don't know, I'll get that a little lighter. Bit of an eyelid on the right side, but then it gets lighter. This is very tiny. Gets a little bit lighter yellow. But not too light. Oh, too dark. All right. Next eye. Once again, upper eyelids creating a shadow, but not as strong as this one. Be careful how much water you leave on your brush. It'll drip right off and then mess up your detail work. Then going straight into that turquoise. But I'm going to make it lighter. I'm adding more white to it. With the darker turquoise, I guess the one we originally mixed up on this right side of this left eye. Do you see a slight little shadow on this part of the eye? That's why I'm bringing my gray up there to blend it carefully with that turquoise I just put down. And blending some up here too. I may need to pull some in so it does blend. Okay, so to take away the frightfulness in those eyes, it really helps to bring the shadow into the pupil. I exaggerated that bit more in that right eye, but it's definitely evident on this left eye. And looking at both eyes to make it symmetrical, what's going to help it look the same size is by adding that shadow above. This is also a very common trait for little kittens. They're kind of growing into their face, so they have those pretty prominent eyelids. And I'm using the dark gray with a bit of the yellow. I'll draw that line that's right above the left eye, but in the opposite direction compared to the right side, and we will be filling that area in with not a shadow, but with our yellows because of this side getting more light. Filling that in a smidge, almost with like a dry brush technique. There's just a little bit of paint on my brush that I pulled it down, and then with the yellow right above. Gets a little darker on the inside. I'm adding more gray. A little darker right here. I also see a little bit of eyelid, which I'm going to use a mix of the yellow with the gray. On the corner, just like we did on that side. I see a little bit on the left. Gotta make those eyes symmetrical as best you can. I think I need to bring the gray down a little bit higher on this left eye. A little bit lower, that's what I meant to say. So you might need to step back and just compare and contrast the size, the shape of these eyes. I'm gonna need, for me, on the left eye, widening it a little bit at the bottom with our turquoise, ever so slightly pulling that down. So make sure you also look at those pupils too and the eyelids. So what I'm going to do is switch to even smaller brush. This is a 2\0 spot brush. This is a small one. And I'm going to add the highlights in, which I kind of don't usually add around now, but I'm going to do it. I'm going in with white and a bit of black. This is our dark gray. I don't want to make it straight white. A very light gray. And carefully I see two boxes on this left side. One that's partially touching the middle bottom of the pupil. And then I'll add more white to this next one. It's pretty light. Right there. And on this left side, oop, doesn't really show up too well with those. Maybe that's a good thing that we're doing the highlights now. Here I'm going to go in with my turquoise and a tiny bit of the gray. And get this a little darker. Get this eye a little darker with our added gray in that turquoise. And while I'm here, I think it would work to bring that there too. So with that gray, just a small little area in the bottom right of the left eye, I just rounded it out. So I'm going to go on with straight white now. Just the smallest amount of white on my brush to get this strong highlight right here. And I'll even go on with white over top that other one. Still not there yet, still not there yet. Turquoise with the gray. You can see I'm adding the smallest amount of paint to my brush, just really not adding a lot because I only want to darken up around that highlight that we added on this right eye. And I just think maybe bring this up a little higher. Okay, that's good. Now Sock's had a little bit of a cold here. You can kind of see it around his nose. I'm gonna tone that down a little bit and just stick with the dark gray around his nose, but not the entire nose, just the nostrils. Then I'll go to the nose medium value color that we made. It's a little on the dark side, so I'm going to add white to it to get that more light, but it's still a medium value. And I'll fill in this entire nose. That's actually what I always recommend for little tiny cat noses. Start with the medium value, then while it's wet, adjust the lights and the darks. So here I go. I'm going to go in with the dark I'll use is the gray, just a little bit on my brush, a little bit of the gray. First start with the line indent in the middle of the nose and bring it down and around the mouth. So cute. Such a cute little face. But so petite, right? And then I will go in with the lights. I'm going to just put a little bit of white on my brush, blend that into the left side. It's going to take a few applications to blend that on the left side of the nose. And I think what I'll do is I'll pull some raw sienna into a bit of gray get the right side a bit darker. There we go. See how I did that? That's raw sienna with a bit of the gray. I'll get above it, above the nose. Sometimes you see like a dark outline above the nose. It can be black or a brown. I'll continue on with that dark gray with raw sienna. Just in a little pile here, just to get around this right side. And it kind of goes out like that. Do you notice that? Right on the right top side of the nostril. And also on the left. Now there's so much blood flow in the ears of kittens and around the mouth and even around the eyes sometimes. We're going to see some of that pink in there, which is why I'm taking the reds that we mixed and used for the nose, adding white to it, and just outlining around the lines we created for the line indent below the nose and for the mouth. Very subtle, but around those lines. All right, you ready to paint those ears? I'm excited. I'm very excited. So I have my size 1 round brush. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to test this out, see how dark it is. And we have no guideline for how deep this is. I'm just going to add a little. I do like that. I'm going to keep going with it. I might change it so it's not super pink, maybe a little bit more on the brown side. So into a corner of this, I'm adding more raw sienna to it. So it's a bit more raw sienna. And we want that pretty deep. It's better to go too deep than not deep enough because we have the hair over top. And I won't go all the way down. Okay, and as I work up, I'll get some more white into that because it's quite a light colored inner ear. You see that? Small areas start with a dark to medium value, then blend in the lights and darks. So much easier, I think. Okay, now raw sienna and some dark gray. That's what I'll use into this little pile here to darken this up. Little bit more gray. Not too much. I'm going to put back some of these beautiful pinks. Putting some back and where because this is a medium value, I'm going to put some back where there's mediums already there, which is like right here. And again with the lighter color. Okay. Oh, maybe even a little bit more. Right in the center. Now the right side's gonna be darker. Doing the same exact thing. Let's get in some of this purple. I'm gonna keep this more purple, I think. Let's just see what happens if I keep this more purple and then add the darks in. Bringing it down pretty far and pretty wide. Getting a bit lighter by adding in more white. Oh, this is so fun. I just love this little guy and I miss him so very much. And I didn't add any raw sienna to that, which is not, I want to do that. I want raw sienna and dark gray. Little circular motions in the center of the ear and then blend up. Adding a little bit more on both sides, but definitely keeping that right ear a little bit more purple. Maybe a bit darker on this right side. Yeah. Getting that darker on the left, top left. Hi Creative, sorry to interrupt, but if you would like to get more in-depth therapeutic instruction, painting cats, dogs, and even other wildlife in acrylics, I have a Masterclass Bundle in the description down below. Back about 9 years ago, when I was deep in addiction, anxiety, and depression, I decided to incorporate regular animal art, drawing and painting animals, while listening to sermons and TED Talks and watching painting tutorials. And this creative habit over day by day actually helped me through that healing recovery process. And it's why I'm so passionate about it today. So inside that bundle, you'll get all those skills that I've acquired in technique and color methods and drawing. And this is ideal for beginners. There's sequence tutorials that progress you to those more advanced level techniques. And lastly, if you need more incentive to follow through and paint and finish these tutorials, I highly recommend you join the community that I have linked in the description down below. I may have something super special coming up around the new year. You don't want to miss it. So again, all those links are in the description. Let's get back to Socks' tutorial. All right, so we're gonna work on the socks now. I'm gonna start with this one in this corner, and I'm really going off of a lot of the socks that my children own. I'm going to, when I add white over this, which is already gray underneath it, it pretty much comes up as a medium gray. I'm going to add that literally just to represent like an old white sock that kind of looks faded. But I want you to just paint however you want these socks to look. Make it your own. Add some variety in each one or make them all the same. It's entirely up to you. So I'll let that dry. I'll work on this one. I'm using my size 1 round brush, and I'll go in with a violet. Let's get some color in here now. That's just white and purple. It's a little too thick of a brush, actually. I don't like how thick that is. So I'll switch to my 3/0 round brush. 3/0 round brush by Arteza. Get that a bit darker purple. A box coming off and the rounded corner of the sock. I don't know what to do here. I'm not entirely sure what I'll do there. What if I did another line? Oh, what if I did lines all the way down? Do I want to do that? I can test it out. What if I just fill in that? I'm going to add more white to that. So I won't bring this box all the way up to that line. I'll actually create more white gap in between the box around the heel and this area. And I won't bring it all the way down to the bottom of the sock. I'll create a little bit of a rounded bottom of this shape so that it kind of looks like the sock is turned up. I might even leave a bit of white so it looks like the sock is just laying over like that. See how this dull background kind of contrasts with these colors and helps bring those wonderful symbolic parts forward? It really adds to it. What if I add some white with a bit of gray to kind of create little creases and dimension in the sock? There's actually a bit of purple in there. Oh, that's okay. Like, what if this was down and that part of the sock is facing up? Like this is curving up. I won't add too much gray in there. Yep, I'm going to go back with my white so that I cannot make that too dark. Kind of adds to the dirty sock look a little bit. Well-used socks. Well played with too. All right, I think so. Maybe what if I add a little bit of white into that? Just to create kind of the texture in the sock. The stretchiness and also the texture that prevents kids from slipping. If you don't like it, you can cover it right up, but you never know until you try. Going back with my white just to lighten this up. Now onto this one. I'll do a different color. I'm going to be adding yellows to socks. Yellows and yellow ochres and raw siennas. So I don't think I'll add another yellow here. I think I might go with maybe a red sock. But I won't really have that many greens. Don't have that many greens. So purple, this needs to be bright. Orange. Let's make an orange. You can add orange if you want to add it straight from the bottle and then mix in some yellow in it, or just white. I'm mixing lots of cadmium yellow with white and permanent red. So for our orange here, lots of cadmium yellow, a tiny, tiny bit of permanent red, and lots of white. Oop, cadmium yellow, permanent red. That'll bring out the blues in the background. So I'm going to try and do the end colored. And because this is such a yellowish, tends to be so thin, we're going to probably need a couple coats for it to stand out. I'm going to make it shaped like that, not a perfect circle. I'm going to try something. I might just lay this here to make like a lighter version of this orange and then blend in some white into it so that the bottom of the sock is like a lighter orange than up here. And I will bring this all the way down. But what if I go in with some white? Because I kind of like this line. I don't know, where else could I add a line? I'm kind of cutting it off, thinking that I could put a line there, but I don't know if I'll have enough room. I'll leave that open-ended. Maybe I want to come back to that. But I do kind of want to go back to this one with just white. Oh, I keep getting more colors in there. These colors are all mixing. So let's try this again with a clean, damp brush and just white. Gonna lighten this up, this sock. Still keeping some of those shadows there though. I got some orange in there. Do I want to keep that? Is that a good accident? I mean, maybe. Maybe. Okay. All right. I'm going to then go do the opposite. Add some light violets into this sock. I'm gonna roll with it. Added some light violet and now I'm just blending it out with white on this bottom sock. So just a very light pastel purple. Look at that. Ooh, okay. Let's go to this one. But what if I already have blues up there. I already have orange here. I'll be adding lots of yellows and browns. I think a beautiful green. Think a beautiful green. So let's go with grass green. I don't have room. I'm gonna have to make room here. Grass green, cadmium yellow, and some white. Grass green, cadmium yellow, and white. What if I create a little bit more dimension in the socks? We'll see. I'm gonna do the ankle part. If we were to add some oranges to socks, that would go so nicely with the blues in this background and even kind of look nice. Being that it's so close to red, if it's like a deep orange, it would work with this green. Complement them very nicely. Then maybe I'll do another line, just like I did here. Or do I do like I did here where it's lighter? I kind of like that more, where I make this part going all the way down and lighter than this heel part by adding in more white. I'm going to darken up this green, adding in more grass green, a little bit more cadmium yellow. Richen that up. Oh, it's still wet, so sometimes that doesn't work so well. What if I did something different though? What if I made like a striped sock? I'm gonna just continue adding more green to lighten it up, working with what I already know, darkening this up. I mean, what other color could I add here? Maybe some more pinks. What if I go in with white and a little bit of this pink? This is the magenta we use for the ears. Get that really light. Add some above. I'm bummed that I still have this, like, well, I guess the fur could go over there. I'm just wishing I brought that down a little further. What if I do that now? I have a little bit of this leftover gray. Add some white to it. You don't want to have to go back to it if you don't have to. Okay. And this sock, I'm not sure about, but I'm going to move on and work on this sock. So I'll do a blue. I'll do a beautiful blue with lots of phalocyan blue and white. So for this sock, you might want to watch me and then give it a try. I will not be covering the whole sock, but most of it. Kind of boxing in a little curvy, unusual looking rectangle. Going off the canvas, and then the rest with this side. Oh, it's actually going to be darker. Yeah, it's going to be darker because of that light source. But just so it doesn't clash with the same value gray, I will make this, adding more white to it to lighten it up. So I'm not actually liking that because it is dark with dark. It's about the same value. So we can, how can we solve this? What if I brought that up with the white? What if I did like little dots? Oh, okay. So it's like the bottom of the sock. I'm going to round this out for the bottom of the sock. And little dots, again, like children's socks, so they don't slip. I'll just bring this white down so I can do that. Yeah, it's even creating like a light blue. I'm digging it. And then I'll let that dry and add the dots on there. And adds variety with the different shapes too. But as for this sock, I am just not quite sure. I'm going to go in with white. I think I'll see what this looks like if I just paint over this light gray or light green. Thankfully, because socks doesn't have very long fur, we can go back to it. And that gives me time to kind of see how it looks and what it needs, if it needs anything, around when we add the fur. Because what if I leave it like that? It just doesn't really look finished. Maybe I can bring this part of the ankle up. So I'll just mix up some more of the grass green and the yellow. You guys are getting the full gist of what's going on in my brain as I'm doing this. Now I'm just giving you a little heads up. I do get caught up in detail. I have a tendency to do this. But if you're adding, say, different objects to your background, maybe you've completed your background already, or maybe you're just going to keep your socks really simple, you can bypass the next couple steps and go to 1 minute and 44 seconds in this video. It's up to you. Bring that up a little higher with white. I'm going to put back some of this pink though. Some of that pink in there. Is this dry yet? Yep, it's ready. I'm just going to switch brushes. I'm going to switch to my size 0 spot. This is actually my size 0 spot brush. And with white, I'm going to do little dots. I'm going to show you the sock that I'm looking at right now. This is an urban air place we go to. These are the little dots that prevent them from slipping and sliding. So that's what I'm going to do. Add these little tiny dots. And what that does is it helps now separate a bit more the grays from that blue. Now here's another optional step, but what I decided to do was add a bit more dimension to this lower right-hand corner blue sock. I go in and around those dots just to touch up some areas that look a little too light, but I darken up the area along the right side, along the edge of this curving rectangle. So you'll see in a moment that I add more phthalocyan blue to this blue mixture, darken it up just slightly, and add it along that edge. So next I go back to my green mixture and I just add another coat over top that green sock on the heel, and then I also add some lines after that. I think what I might do, and I'm going to test this out, is going with this green, add stripes this way, going off the side. And just rounding out the front of that sock. All right, so here until we reach 1 minute and 44 seconds, I'll just be doing touch-ups to the background, adding a bit more color, another layer or two to those socks, adding some more white. How much you want to add to this background is up to you, but it's just a repeat in this portion up until I get a fresh, clean paint palette and we start mixing up the colors and painting Socks' fur. All right, so with a fresh new paint palette, clean, I'm adding titanium white, yellow ochre, raw sienna, I'm going to add black just in case, and then cadmium yellow, and then I will go with my orange. I'll add a little bit of orange. I'm going to mix up the yellow ochre and white. I'm going to pull some of that aside, add more yellow ochre and raw sienna. So here I go with more yellow ochre, more raw sienna. I'll do some of that with yellow ochre and cadmium yellow. And by the way, just so you can see these very subtle changes in value and you can understand where I'm working and how and why, please pull out that reference photo. That is in the description down below in the download. Some white with a bit of a yellow tone to it. So it'll be yellow ochre and some gray. So yellow ochre with some black and lots of white. That's a little too dark. I'll pull some of that aside and get that lighter with more white. All right, so I'll start with my spot brush, size 0 spot brush. I'm going to test this out, this very light yellow ochre mixture. Okay. Work on the left side by that ear, by that left ear, and up. All right, so by now we have the eyes, nose, mouth, and ears painted. This is something that I do for any cat, whether it's a kitten or an adult cat. It's once you've completed those main details in the face that I recommend moving on to the fur area around the face and the body. But real quick, let's just name some proportional and skeletal differences between kittens and adult cats. So for one, they have much rounder faces, shorter noses. In proportion to their heads, their ears look very large, and those noses are so itty-bitty tiny. And like I said before, often pink. There's gonna be some good strong blood flow around those areas, so I always recommend adding a bit of permanent red. And as I'll show you in a moment when we are painting around the muzzle, it's not as round, it's closer to the face, it's not as developed, so you don't have those whisker pads sticking out as prominently like adult cats. All right, and I'll take my liner brush, my size 0 liner brush, and with this color, I want to make sure it's clean and damp. I'll start putting lines over top and in front. Now I think I can still go up, but I will be needing to add those inner ear hairs in a little bit. But I'll first, because these are so light and so fine, I can take them up a little higher. And I'll do the same up on the forehead. Now the key here to unlock this beautiful fine fur texture is to make sure you're not adding much paint to your brush, that you're using some kind of long bristled liner brush, even a rigger brush, but just with a few bristles, so it's very fine clusters of lines. I'm not making each line perfectly straight. I'm giving it a bit of an angle left and right as I'm doing this over top of the background, and we'll be doing this around the border of the cat, pulling it forward. Now I'm also not making very long lines. It's actually very fine, short lines, just perfect for a kitten who hasn't had much time to grow out that long fur coat. And last but not least, you make sure that you're watching your brush when it starts to pull on your canvas or mixed media paper, that it's ready to wash your brush off, and pat it damp, not dry, not sopping wet. You want to keep those bristles moist, just enough so that it allows the paint not to dry and get sticky on your brush. He's so cute. He almost looks like he has a little bit of fuzzies right here in the center. These little cute fine hairs on the top of his head. So just in the center here, I'm gonna add a bit more length to these lines, being extra careful not to add any clumps to these lines either. All right, so that's kind of a start. I want to go now to this brown yellow. Test this out. Okay. And now working on the darkest part of the side of the face, which is on the right side of the face. I'm going to leave a gap for that light fur around the right eye. So on the small little face of a kitten, line after line, I am blocking in the different values. It is a bit time consuming and a little bit tedious, but you really want to get it right. We'll bring this all the way up to the forehead. So when working on the fur on the face, your starting point is on the darkest side, getting the least amount of light. I know I started with that lighter fur. That may help you get warmed up your hands working on those fine lines. It may help you gauge value better, but eventually with your small detail brushes, I'm going to recommend that right side. So in this instance, I'm working with this yellow-brown on the right side, kind of cutting that face in half because I'm working in these markings on Socks's face. And you can see there's just little indications of these tabby stripes on the face. So that's what I'm going to do first. I'm using my lighter yellow now on the left side, but don't want to do that too soon. Now with these kitten faces being so much smaller than adult cats, it works in our favor because we want to work wet into wet. I want to work at a steady pace with these dark values so that in a little bit I can start blending in some lighter value lines. Which cuts in around the side of the eye, you see that? There's white underneath that eye, and there's darkness here. So I'll actually probably add that lightness now. And this comes down a little far. So what I'll do, I'll bring this up a little higher. And now go wash my brush off and go to the lighter color. All right, so next, before this dries, I'm going to go in with my yellow in the areas that are white, but also using lines to cut up into the area of brown yellow that we just painted. And throughout this process, keep a close watch on the color I'm pulling from. This is the yellow that does not have the cadmium yellow in it. I often, but not always, like to start with the more realistic colors, the colors that kind of match what I'm seeing in the reference, and then gradually blend and progress and layer to those more abstract colors, those vivid yellows, those little accents of purple and blue and some turquoise. Now, I may have made that too light, but we'll gauge the value once we do the left side. Now I'll cut back in and around some of these with the brown yellow. Now I'm going to the lighter yellow, doing some blending. I could even do a mix of this yellow brown and the lighter yellow. And now bringing this color up at the bottom of the right ear. So I'm going to mix up more of this mix between our light yellow and our yellow brown. I'll add some in the corner of this right ear, and then we'll start to make something called Henry's pocket. It's this distinct thin flap of skin on the lower outer edge of a cat's ear on both sides, and it's present in kittens and adults. So in a moment with this color, I'll be showing you how to add that and blend that into some of the pink areas very subtly and very petite on both ears. And now I have a little bit of the light yellow on my brush, so I can curve this down and in. So if you watch me here with the smallest little open C on the bottom of this right ear, I'm making the Henry's pocket. Now I'm subtly connecting it to a slightly lighter value than that pinkish gray with this yellow. If the inner ear was much darker, I probably wouldn't be able to get away with this. You have to somewhat make a slightly lighter value on the outer edge of the ear compared to what's inside. So right above that Henry's pocket, I'm creating this thickness on the inside lower part of the ear. And I also want to do that on the left side, right where we did it, that curve there. So try your best on this left ear to keep everything symmetrical, making sure it's not up higher or down lower. And then once I've done that on the left ear, I'll also add in a little bit of that thickness, joining that area with the yellow. All right, so here go back with the brown yellow. Finish this off on the right side. And it stops about here. I'll get a little bit yellow just so I can separate values from that gray blue. Get this just slightly lighter, and so that you can actually see the lines. So I'm going to go on with this lighter yellow, start working up to the eye and back down for around the muzzle. Now it gets a bit darker here, so what I might do, I might do the gray yellow right here, a little bit right there. And go in first, fill in with this lighter yellow, and then lighten it up on that side while that's wet. Aha, okay, and now I see that I can go in with this darker gray yellow. I have a little too much paint there. And now we really need to sort of shape that muzzle in that area. I'm going to actually just go around the muzzle, just try and shape this with my liner brush. Now this portrait here is a perfect example of this muzzle, how it almost just looks like one round ball that I'm not going in towards the lip area, I'm going straight down around the chin, especially because Socks is looking up. You also want this value to be slightly darker, not too much darker than the yellows that we've applied, the yellow browns. This is gonna connect to those yellow browns on the right side, but just be a smidge darker than those lighter yellows around the muzzle to push the muzzle forward. All right, and then go with my slightly lighter yellow. I'll do a mix between this lighter gray yellow right over here. And again, we don't want to make that too light because it's the darker side. Get that a little darker while it's wet. Even bringing it down. Now I'll just take some time here to bring this gray yellow down a bit on this right side around the neck, but not too far down. We're gonna move our way over to the left side of the face. Okay, going back to my lighter yellow, I'm going to add some lightness right here, bring it over and cut into some of those orange browns. And also add some on the bottom around the muzzle, so on the chin area. But I'll only add a little bit of this yellow here until I move to this lighter gray yellow on the outside. So there's a bit of light heading the bottom of the chin, very strong on the left side of the muzzle and on the chin, but a little bit gets on that right side as well. So you want this to be just slightly lighter than the light yellows we were just adding. I'm going in with my darker version of this, the darker gray yellow. Now, if you watch me here, I'm not filling in this bottom lip area. I'm actually allowing some lines to cut in around those yellows that we added. Just give it a bit of texture, just a slight shadow. And now on the lighter side. So I'm going to go in with a mix between this light and this gray and make the other side, shape it. But getting that lighter then. Okay, so going into this lighter version, the lighter gray yellow. And some lines here with the darker gray. I'm getting this a bit longer on the chest. Now this is going to be much lighter. So I'm going to add to this yellow, ochre, and white mixture, add more white to it on this left side of the muzzle. And now for a lighter version of this brown yellow with a little bit more of this yellow. Okay, this yellow mixture with the yellow brown. Test this out. It needs to be lighter in value than that left side, so let's add some more of the yellow to it. Maybe a bit more white. Now, how you adjust values is you test it out first. You test it out when in doubt, and while it's wet, that's when you either add a bit more white or lighter yellow like we're doing here to make it lighter, or even a lighter pink, depending on how abstract you want to go. If you want to darken it up, add its color complement, or in this case, darker yellow brown, or even purples or blues to darken it up. And I'm going to leave a gap for the white on this strip. I'm leaving that an area that's going to be white. So it's important that you work on the dark side of the animal's face and then slowly progress to the lighter areas. And then I recommend filling in the markings. Always start with your darks first, even if that includes the markings, and then work to the lighter side. Adding more white to that for this area where it joins with that lighter gray. All right, so I'll stop about there. Oh, maybe over a little. Because it kind of comes in underneath that eye and down. And while I'm here with this lighter version, I'm going to add some over top the gray with the liner brush. And just get a little bit more fuzzy right up here, the forehead. So cute. Okay, and so now into this gray, but lighter. Okay, this is the gray yellow, but lighter. Add some up on the side and down. And along the eye here at the bottom. And now this white area that we have left. Okay, I'm going to bring it down to the top of the nose. And bring over this brown, but mix it in with some of the yellow. This brown yellow in with the lighter yellow. See how I'm bringing it over, getting a little lighter. All right, now I'm jumping straight to, I'm using the same thing, this brown mixed with the yellow, adding it just like we did on here, right up here, before that area dries. just like that side. Also a little bit to the left. It's subtle, you can hardly see it. I'll add that again so you can see it better. Right there. And also, like, we're gonna make this line darker, but there's a line on the other side that I can make with this brown. This mix between the brown and the yellow. That goes down and over. And fades. And then there's just a little bit that goes over and under and around that left eye. I'm just going to jump to that darker yellow brown, working it below the right ear. As I'm looking at these values, that side needs to be a bit darker. And like right here, it should be a little darker, so I might pull in some of this gray mixed with the brown, just to get that value right at the bottom. Maybe a little bit more of this mix between these two colors, just to bring this over a little bit. And a little bit right here. I'm just adding a bit of this brown right there. And I added a little bit more than I need. And I went over some of my dark gray in that eye. So I'm going back to this gray yellow, cutting up a little higher in here so it's symmetrical, about the same as the left side, and taking it over the side into that background. I'll also take more of this lighter version, blend it over, cutting at an angle up. All right, so next what I'm gonna do is go in with this brown, start adding some to the back with a different brush. Dropped a little. I'll go with my size 0, maybe not that brush. Let's try our size 1 round brush. Let's try it. All right, and I'll start adding this dark brown. I'm gonna add just a hint more raw sienna to this top area that we're working on, the darkest part. A bit more raw sienna. All right, so we've completed the face for the most part, still a few more details. Next, we're moving on to the darkest side of the body. So exact same as the face, but now we're getting a little bit longer with our brush strokes, making things a little bit flatter for the first base layer. And that's why I'm using a larger brush. Notice my brush strokes are up and down, getting a little bit longer. As I work down. Now I'm going to pull in some of this lighter yellow. There's a little bit of lightness right on the side here. Gets a little lighter. I'm not pulling it all the way over the background yet. We'll use our liner brush for that. And I think the easiest thing to do is to take this brown without using too much paint and just wrap it around from here to here. But taking it in so we can add the lighter layers over top. Now, although this fur is not very long yet, I still want to bring it in a little further, make those lines a little longer around the belly and chest area, anywhere where the lighter strands are going to be layered over top. Just touching up that right side of the face. I think I'll just paint this in. All right, we're gonna have to work at a steady pace for this next part. I'll just paint the rest of this in with my cat's tongue brush size 8. So initially I thought I was gonna do one row at a time, but because of this kitten being so small, and if I work wet into wet, I can add a base layer of this area, which is more orange, tan, yellows. Then while it's wet, blend in those rows of stripes. They're more subtle stripes. They're not really strong and bold. So that's up to you how you want to paint the body, how large the area is that the kitten's body takes up on your canvas, how fast you can work. I'm going to recommend that you work on one body part, one area at a time. But in this case, with such a tiny little kitten, this option, this technique, it might work better for you or not. See what you think. All right, and now with my liner brush, I believe with my liner brush, I'm going to go in with this lighter yellow. And first where I really see it is at the bottom here. But wait, I need to add some of this gray. I'm going to do a mix of this gray-brown right here before we add that white over top. So I definitely don't want to be layering those lighter strands, that second layer on the one side, over top the white that hasn't even had a layer. You want to make sure those dark values are down first, then start layering those lighter strands. Okay, wash off my brush, go to this lighter version, and now start climbing up to create those subtle stripes. So this is like really white down here, but then I'll go up with another row next to it. A little too much water on my brush. And another row, and I think there's actually one I can fit right beneath that. Trying to make the rows even. So I know this may be a bit tricky, but try your best to curve these clusters of lines, these rows, in a way that's not really overlapping, but very close to each other. 4 rows in total. And I'm not filling in these sections. I'm making them with line after line, with very small gaps in between. And the reason we want to do this is it blends in with some of those, it like fades in with some of those yellow, darker yellow browns, which is what we want, because his stripes are not that bright. They're not that strong. I'm starting the lighter stripes right here, kind of in from that white and up. So we worked on the belly area. We're going to now join some of those lighter stripes to the top, but not making those stripes as prominent on the back just because of the view and that it's getting less light. Now it is drying, so I'm going to need to bring some of that orange brown in there. And on that last row, I don't know, do I want to do, I think I might do a mix between the brown, yellow, and this one. I'm going back to this brown just so I can work it a little bit more on that shoulder, work it up a little higher. And then I'll go in with this lighter yellow because we're actually getting a bit of a highlight back here. So that's what I'll use to cut over top the gray background, very carefully. And it should connect with some of these stripes. So with my yellow brown, I want to close off this gap here, getting rid of any little white specks over canvas, overlapping some of those lines over top the green sock. All right, I'm going back to my brown yellow doing some touch-ups. So to clean up those rows, any areas that I kind of overlapped with the yellows that shouldn't be there, I'm going to touch that up with this darker yellow-brown, going in between some of these rows and even cutting in between some of these lines, give it more texture. Now it doesn't look right to have these rows wrap around the bottom area, this underbelly. So I'm just going to blend this area with the lighter yellows, blend it into those darker yellow browns. I'm just adding more raw sienna to this brown yellow to get this area in the back a bit darker. And maybe a little bit down here. I'll even use this to bring this in. I'm using this gray yellow, bringing that in on that arm. Adding a little bit more lightness. Actually, I'll go back to this yellow-brown. Just pull that out a little bit more. All right, so I have my size 8 cat's tongue brush. And I'm going to start with this darker gray. Getting into these dark areas right here. But then not all the way, because closer to the bottom, I'll go with the lighter yellow-gray. And this, I'm going to test this out just to make sure. It might be a little too dark for right here. Yep, so I'm going to blend into that some of this lighter yellow-gray to lighten it up. Here on the chest, I see some of those dark shadows. But then I'll wash off this brush, get it clean and damp, size 0 liner brush. Cut alongside that with the lighter yellow-brown, lighter yellow-gray. And up top here where it gets a little lighter. Now we're painting white fur here. That's why I'm going in with the lighter gray yellow to lighten it up, but I still want to capture that shadow around the chest. So that's the difficult part, is painting white fur in the area facing the light source. You still want to have subtle shadows, but making sure they're not too dark. Then it starts to look like gray fur. So it's that fine balance, making sure you add enough white, but not too much and not too little. And a little bit of the darkness on the leg, going back to that dark yellow-gray. And on the side of that paw. And it stops about there. But then I'm going to go immediately before it dries in with that lighter version. And with lines, start moving to the left. So I'm breaking up that subtle shadow along the lower belly and chest with these lighter grays, so it doesn't just look like a block or something covering up his chest. We want to break up that line while that gray is wet with these lighter grays. What I'll also do to make sure I don't lose these lines for the toes, I did a mix between the lighter yellow gray and the darker, and I'll just outline the toes. I'll do that in this foot too. And while I'm here, I'll also get this line for this toe, which actually kind of extends back pretty far. I don't know if it's just the shadow that does that. Go back to the darker version for just right above it, blending that. And then with the lighter version, since we're here, and I say the lighter yellow-gray, that's what I'll paint right here. All right, so doing a mix between these two again. I'll work on this right arm. You really want the value to just be right there in between, not too light, not too dark. And I might even need to go back to this brown and a mix between this yellow to bring this in a little bit. Now with a mix between our yellow and the yellow brown, we just want to bring up the colored fur up a little higher so we can layer the white fur, those gray strands, over top. All right, I could go on there, but I need to move on, cover up the white. So I'm going to work along this arm with this mix between these two values. And I'm not sure exactly where to start with this shadow right here on the chest on the side of that arm. I'll do a mix between the two, see if that's good enough. This is the tricky part because we're going to have to add some highlights on this part of the leg, but tie in some shadows on this part of the arm, like this shoulder part. So I might go to a different brush and then switch back to my liner brush. I'll try my filbert brush, my size 2 filbert brush. And start connecting it to this part, this shaded part. The values are subtle here. And we'll use a liner brush to cover this over on the side, over top of the brown yellow. But I'll get that a little lighter. I'm going to my lighter version right here. And the lighter version here where it's getting highlighted. There we go. I think we're seeing it now. And back to this darker version, just to kind of go up a little higher on the leg. And now I think I can go back to my liner brush and we'll start pulling these strands out and over. So I'll start with the lighter, which I might need to mix up more soon. It's hard, it's not really showing up very well, so what I can do is maybe cut down a little further with some of my browns, brown yellow. I'll let that dry a little bit, but I'll put a few more back here and then let that dry, and so then I can go back in with that color. Let's try this area here. Line after line, making sure the hair strands are layered and in the right direction. Now this can be tricky. It's very important that you make sure your lines are fine and thin, and also not too light, not too dark here. You want to stack lines so the bottom layers are beneath the top layers. So just sporadically place them, but making sure the bottom layers are under those top layers of fur as we work up the chest. Now I'm going to add more white to the light gray, and we'll be using this not only to lighten up this chest area, but also revisiting some of the areas on the front limbs that just need a little bit more lightness. And bringing some of that lightness over top these legs now. Getting that a little darker still. I made that jump to too light too soon. I'm going to wash off my brush and try and get what's left of this one. So with a mix between this yellow gray and the light version, I'm going to bring that along the side, that curving shadow along this front limb. I'll also get a bit more of this darkness right here by the neck. And now I just need to get the really white spots. So these are just really white. I'm gonna have to mix up more of this, but I'm adding white into what's left of it. So you can see at this point, we've layered and blended all the way to the point where we're almost using white. It's not quite white, but almost there. So I'll fill in this foot and also revisit some of the areas that need to get even lighter around the chest. I went over that toe a little bit, but I can always paint that back in. In fact, I may not even need it, but we'll see. And while I'm here, I'm going to cut it along the side into that gray background. And now for this leg, I'm going to add in more white. Now I get this question quite a lot from artists when I'm doing white fur anywhere where there's lots of white being used. I used the Golden Brand Titanium Fluid White Paint for this very reason. It really doesn't dry very quickly to my brush when I'm doing this detail work compared to when I'm using medium body white paint, like that thick white paint. So I don't have to wash off my brush as frequently when using this white. This is why I only use this white. I have it in the description down below. I discovered it on accident during COVID. And now it's the only white that I buy. Pulling some of these lines over into some of those medium value grays. Very carefully pulling some of them over. All right, so once you've added 1, 2, even 3 rounds of your dark, medium, and light values using the layering and blending technique, now we revisit the dark values. We add more contrast. Now I brought that over a little too far, so I'm going to wash it off. Get this back over. And I'm darkening this up, adding some more raw sienna into some of this gray yellow to add a bit more darkness right in front of this back foot. And I'm going to actually take some off just to try and create a bit more shadow there. Then once you've revisited your dark values, even gone a bit darker, now we go even lighter, applying our lightest values. That's why we never want to go too light too soon throughout this process. We want to leave them until the end. More white. And this is basically white. I am going with straight white. Okay, not straight white. It's mixed in with a little bit of this gray yellow right here where it's really getting hit by light. And we'll be putting some on the face too soon. Those strongest highlights, they come at the end. And I'll start pulling some down and in front of this chest. So there's some dark areas that we need to put back in around this neck, but I'm going to do a mix between our light, very light yellow and this darker one below it. So I can pull this down and to the left like that. And then go back to the lighter version and cut up into it. Added more white. Cutting up into it now with some blending. A little bit too much water there. right along the side of the face and around the left of the muzzle. Let's get that even whiter. Right underneath the side of the muzzle, like that. And along the side of the face, cutting up into some of those darker yellow grays. Now, so I don't entirely cover up those yellow grays around the neck, I'm using the dry brush technique, using what little paint I have left on my brush to add just a subtle amount of lightness over top those areas. I'll go up on the head. We're going to go back over top some of those oranges and add little strands of this light gray. I'll even do a little bit right here. And just a few actually scattered on that side of the head. I'll lighten this part up. That's definitely an obvious highlight right there on the right of the eye. And a little bit over here. All right, let's get some of these lighter strands in this fur. But what if I go with this one? This lighter yellow, yellow ochre and white. What if I just add more white to it? So now we're going to be defining single strands. There's just like little fuzzies, peach hairs that are coming out of some of these rows of stripes. And this is just a little bit more yellow, just to add a bit more color. So very carefully with a fine liner brush or rigger brush, we don't want to make these too bold, too thick. Take your time as we sporadically add these on the back. So again, don't think of this as another layer over top the light strand rows. These are those little hairs that are sticking out from those areas, so they have much larger gaps in between compared to when we added the base and those other lighter layers. This should be slightly lighter in value. But then right here it gets much lighter, so I'll use that there. I'm barely pressing down on my canvas because I don't want this to be too loud, too bright. I'll pull in some of this yellow, more yellow version. Add some up here. And let's see what it looks like if I add some more white to that with a little bit of this gray. The darker version, this one, and I add some white to that. And I use that to pull in some of those strands that aren't too light. That helps. That's it. You definitely don't want to have areas that are just a block of color. You want to have little clusters of lines cutting over top of it, oftentimes with the lighter value. All right, back to this brown. I'm going to add some back in between this mix between the yellow and the brown yellow. I'll add a bit more of the yellow so I can get some along this side over top the gray on that side. Now to break up areas that just look a little too dark, like right here, just use lines. You can break it up with slightly lighter value lines. All right, I'm going to go back to this yellow, mix in a little bit of the gray yellow, and start lighting up some of this right side of the face just a little bit more. And adding more white to that so I can get this even lighter. All right, so at this point, I'm relying less on this reference photo of socks and more on what I'm seeing on my canvas. So I'm going to encourage you now, just look at your work and see where you might have to go a little lighter or maybe a little darker, or adjust a medium value to help join a very light area with a very dark area. I'll go back to this gray yellow to fix up these toes a little bit more. And again, back to this version that was slightly darker with the yellow in it to add a few more hairs over top here. And maybe get that a bit darker. I'll add some more raw sienna to this. And even more for right under here. cutting into some of these strands up here. Just not content with that, so I'm going to have to go back and add some more. Get it a little darker maybe. Now, if ever there's a place where you're a little stuck on, just not quite sure what it needs, move to another spot. Work on that area, and especially areas around that place where you're stuck, and sometimes it'll come to you eventually. I left a bit of white on this foot, so I'm just going back to it. Cover up some of that white. I'll darken this up. And while I'm here, I think I'll go in with a darker gray, just with white and lots of black, with my liner brush. And open up this mouth slightly, get it a bit darker. And what I also have to do is I have to get those roots around the whisker. And they're not very bright, so I'm going to do a mix and test this out, the dark yellow gray and the lighter version. And do these little dots, see if they're dark enough. They're not, so let's try the darker version. That might not even be dark enough. Let me add a bit more black to that without getting it too dark. Test, test, and test some more. That's how you learn whether it's the right value or not. I always say acrylics is very forgiving. If you don't like it, just let it dry and paint right over it. Now, I might recommend for you using a size 0 Arteza spot brush to do these tiny little dots. I recommend that over the liner brush that I'm using. These dots are extremely tiny. They're not many rows and not super dark. So I recommend starting on that darker side with these dots, then adding white to it to lighten it up for the side, like this left side, getting more light. I'm going to go back with this lighter version of yellow with a little bit of added these two grays together. Make them a little smaller, those dots, a little too thick. There, that's better. And getting that even lighter, so I'm going to add some of this yellow, add some white to it, get some highlights right on the chin. And even maybe right there too. And back to the dark gray to darken this part of the mouth. Bring it down a little. In the mouth area doesn't look just quite right, so I'm going to actually add a little bit of a glaze. So I added water to this lighter version to lighten this side up with the glaze. Even down a little further. Maybe I need to extend it out a little bit, so I'm going to take this yellow ochre and white mixture, add some white to it. Extend this part of the mouth out a little further, just a smidge. And we really don't have much texture on the feet, so I'm going to take some of that, add some of the gray yellow. Add some more texture on the right side of that right foot. Get that a little bit lighter. And get some more of this light value on the side of the arm. More texture, that's what I'm trying to add. Very subtle little texture. I'm going to go back to this lighter yellow, add more white to it, and go back and add some more white here, pulling it down a little bit more over top the foot, that back foot that's kind of hiding under here. Pulling some of this white up a little. And I think I'll go again, another layer on the back with this yellow ochre and white with added white. And we have yet to add the inner ear hairs to Socks's ears. So I'm going to mix in, I'll just do with a gray. I'll start with a very light gray. That's white with some black. Very, very light gray. Wash off my brush. And I'll add that to the right ear first. Ever so carefully. From the bottom, left inside of the right ear and up and out. to curl these over a little bit more than I did. Get them a little bit longer and more curled. I tell you, when I work on one area, something else then pops out at me that I need. And as I'm doing these inner ear hairs, just like we added a glaze around the neck to just lighten up that area without covering up all the gray, I'm going to add another glaze that's going to darken up the area around the lips with this gray. That helps a lot. Add a slight bit of darkness there. Even connect it to some of these dots. And final touches, guys, final touches. I'm just adding a few more of this lighter yellow mixed with some of our gray and white. For those light hairs on the back, on Sock's back and belly. And that's what I'll do. I'll just continue adding a bit more lightness to the back. I'll also pull in some of this lighter version of the yellow gray over more, especially where it hits a bit of that brown yellow. And last but not least, we have whiskers. We're going to paint in those whiskers. Oh, I just needed a little bit of lightness right there in the feet. Couldn't resist, but now I can go back in. I'll use this light gray we were just using for the inner ear. I'll add some more white to that. Make sure it's clean and damp so we can add those whiskers. Start on the right side with your liner brush If you're right-handed, that's what I recommend.
So because this little
And
kitten
then
is
slowly
so
relieve brush
young,
off your
these
brush so
whiskers
it's
are
nice and
not
thin at
very
the end.
long. But it's important that as you're making them relatively short in length, that the end, the tip of those whiskers are the thinnest point, and the thickest point is at the root, around where we added those dots on the muzzle. Now, if you're up for it, we're also going to add the top whiskers around on the forehead, and I'll only add 1 or 2 above each eye. And again, these aren't very long.
I think I'll leave it at that for the ones up top, but I might do another one on the right side of the face. And lengthen that one right there. Those are going to be basically white on the left side. And last but not least, I think I see a little highlight that I'm going to add with a glaze of this white, okay? Just a subtle glaze right here on the right of the eye, to the right of that pupil on the right eye.
All right, creatives, so that wraps it up for our kitten tutorial. I hope you learned a lot. Share this with a friend who may also be struggling with anxiety, depression, or addiction. If this blessed you, be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye.